what we just did is we created two different CRUDs. We created an author's CRUD, and we also created a books CRUD. And I want to show you how we can create a relationship between these two different CRUDs. So if you don't know how to create a CRUD, go back and watch my previous video about how to make these CRUDs using a package. It's really easy to use. But now we need to create a relationship with them. So essentially what I want to do is I want to have the ability to create an author, name the author, and then on right here, every author is going to have a button that says View Books. So when you click that button, it's going to take you to the Books CRUD, and it's only going to show you books written by the author that you picked. And then when you go to create a new book, it's going to automatically pre-fill this with the author's ID that you have picked, and it will add it to the list of books for that author. Okay, so let's go ahead and create this. So the first thing that I want to do is I actually want to add a back button to the books page. So I'm going to go to the index page of the books, and I'm going to come up to the top here, and I'm going to add a back button. Okay, so we'll refresh. That way we can go back to the authors page. Let me just show you what that looks like really quick. It's basically just an anchor tag that goes back to the authors index page, and yeah, that's it. That's all it is. It's pretty simple. So now when we're on the books page, we can go back to the authors page. That's probably the most important first starting point. Okay, so when we're on the authors page, I can create new authors. I want to create that button that says View Books. So let's just go down our list. So on our authors index page, let's create a button for each author that is just a View Books. So it's just going to be a button that's an anchor tag that goes to the books index page, but instead of just going straight to the books index page, we're going to add in a variable into the query string that is just the number of the author ID that we picked. Okay, so let's take a look at that. We refresh it. Now you can see that we've added in this button right here. It says View Books. So I click it, and all it does is it takes us to the books index page. But there is a difference now. Now that we're on the books index page, we actually have the author that we picked. Their ID is now in the query string. Okay, so we can go. Now that doesn't change the fact that this is a list of all the books, but we need to filter these books by the value that's in this query string. So on the books controller, let's go over to the books controller. All right, so on the books controller, so we have the index page, and right now it's showing us all the books, but we want to filter that by the ID that's in the query string. So we're going to import a class that's the request class, and we're going to import that request class into the index method right here. And what this is going to do is it's going to give the index method the ability to pull information from that query string. So what do we want to pull? Well, we want to pull that author ID out of the query string. So let's get that out of the query string. So now we have the variable that's in the query string stored in this PHP variable right here. Now we need to filter the books by that author. So let's grab that. So instead of just grabbing all the books, we want to grab the books where the author ID equals the author ID in the query string. So let's look at that. So books where the author ID, the column author ID is equal to the author ID in the query string. And we just do that a get method. So we're going to save that, and let's refresh this. And the author ID is 2. So it's only showing books with the author ID of 2. But let's create a new author just so we can really see that in action. So we have author number 2 and author number 3. If we view books on author number 3, you can see there's no books available. I'm just going to create an example book, which is author number 3. So we go back to authors. Now when we press view books by author number 3, it's going to show the only book the author number 3 wrote. And if we press view books by author number 2, it's only going to show books by author number 2. Okay? So that's pretty cool. So when we're on the books page, when we are on the view books page, and I press this create button, you can see that I have to enter the author ID manually. And that's not good. I'm already on, I've already selected a specific author, author number 2. So when I press the create button to create a new book, this number 2 should already be filled out. So what we need to do is we need to, on the books index page, we need to pass in the author ID to the books index page as well. Okay? So now this index page has a variable that I can add to this create button that includes the author ID that we can then pass into the query string. So let's save this and go ahead and create that button. Now that we have the author ID that's been passed to the view, we can go to resources, views, books, index page. Let's change that create button, okay? So that create button is now going to look like this instead. I'm just going to delete the create button, and I'm going to add this button in instead. It's very similar, but it is slightly different. So we have an anchor tag that goes to the routes book create, but we're also going to have that query string add in the author ID. So now the author ID is in the query string, okay? So let's save that and see what it does to this button. So we refresh it, we have an add a book button, and instead of just adding a new book generally, we have this author ID in the query string once again, which is super important. Having this up here means that we can take this variable and add it to the author ID automatically, which is super important. What we need to do is pre-fill it using this and add it to the create page on the books. Now you'll see right here, it is null right now, which means it has no value in it. But we'll paste this in, which basically gets the value out of the query string with a variable author ID. So that we're going to save that. We're going to refresh this page and see it automatically takes the value out of the query string and adds it into the author ID. But also notice that as a user, we have the ability to change this, and we actually don't want the ability to change it. We want that to be a read-only input. So we're going to come over here. We're going to add the read-only flag to that variable, refresh. And now when we try to change it, we actually can't. I can't backspace, it doesn't work. So when we create this, when we go back and we click add a book, it's going to automatically be in there, and all we have to add is the title. Okay? Now it sends us back to the books index page, but notice we do not have a variable in the query string. I'm going to fix that when we go to store the variable. So it asks for the input. We click create, and it's going to store the variable using this store function in the books controller. And we need to get that author ID and add it to a variable so that we can add it to the return route when we go back to the index page. So now, after we save that to the database, it's going to redirect us to the books index page, but we're also going to include the author ID of the author that is in the input. So it's going to, again, filter all the books on the index page by that by this author. So we press create, and it takes us back to the author ID page, the author page with an ID of 2. So I go add book, new book, create, takes us back to the author page. Great. So that's most of what you need to do, except we also need to change the edit page as well. So if I go to edit one of these books, right, I still have the ability to change this, and that's not what we want. So let's go to the edit page, and instead of instead of having that to be changeable, we need to change read only to true. There we go. So now when we refresh this edit page, you can see I'm not able to change this anymore. Now, when you actually go to save this, you press edit, and to save it, we run into the same problem as when we were doing the create page, is that the books, when it returns, it does not return us to the books index page with the author ID added. So we need to add that in. So that actually is in the books controller under the update method. We need to grab the author ID right here. And then we need to take that author ID and add it to the query string when we go back to the index page. So back to authors. We view the authors by Billy, we edit one of the books, new book 2, and then when we save it, it takes us back to the index page, again, filtered by the author that we were just using. After that, we need to actually change it so that, let's say we're on the books page and we delete a book, we run into the same issue. When it sends us back after it deletes it, it doesn't add the variable to the query string. So we need to add that in to the destroy function. So let's just go to the destroy function. We get the author ID from the queries, we add the variable for the author ID, and make sure that you add this underneath the book data poll. You don't want it up at the top. And then when you do the return route, you want to return back to the books index page, but it needs to be by the author that wrote it. So when you go back to authors, we go to view books, we delete one of the books, it takes us back to the index page of the author that is in the query string. And so now every aspect or every function of the one-to-many relationship is now working. You have the ability to add authors. You can create new authors. And you can go to the books page for that author. We can add a new book. It automatically sets up that this what the ID is for this author. We can title the book, and we can delete the book, we can edit the book, and then also when we go back to, let's take a look at our database, see all of the books by, we have a list of all the books, they're by different authors. Let's delete author number 2. If you go to delete Billy B, which is author number 2, you can see in the database, if we refresh it, it deletes all of the books by author number 2 as well. So you don't have dangling pieces of data in your database. So that's how you create the relationship between two different CRUDs. In the first video, I showed you how to make a CRUD, and in this video, I showed you how to solidify that one-to-many relationship in that CRUD. And it's, I know it seems a little bit complicated, but honestly, if you just go through all of these steps and correct where it says author ID and correct where it says book and books, you just have to read the command and update the information that's in the command and add it into the correct place. And following this tutorial probably is a pretty good guide for that. Anyways, thanks for watching. I hope this was helpful, and I will see you again in the next video.